Germany, looking northwards towards the distant seacoast, and where the Moselle flows east from France to join the Rhine, in the wooded Eifel Mountains, lies the most picturesque and difficult motor racing circuit in the world, the Nurburgring. This is the traditional setting for the German Grand Prix, and here, at the scene of its pre-war triumphs, is one of the great racing cars of the past, the 1937 W125 Mercedes, with its 8-cylinder, 645-horsepower engine. Powerful, too, is the famous Mercedes team manager, Alfred Neubauer, who has with him the European champion of 1939, Hermann Lang. They have come to the ring specially for our cameras to record. It's 25 years since this Mercedes raced here, and Grand Prix cars of today are limited to barely a quarter of the capacity, producing only a fraction of the horsepower of this, the most powerful Grand Prix racing car ever built. The Nurburgring is made up of 14 miles of road specially built for racing and high-speed testing. For much of the first 5 miles, the road descends in a series of fast curves. The town of Adenau is nearly halfway round at the foot of the circuit. The road now climbs towards one of the trickiest corners of all, the carousel. Lang is coming round for another lap, and this time you will sit behind the wheel and hear the 1962 World Motor Racing Champion Graham Hill giving his impression of the finest of all motor racing circuits.
From the start, we leave the wide apron in front of the pits and get funneled into the narrow section just down here, which constitutes the normal width of the circuit. Of course, just after the start of a Grand Prix, we're all about 30-odd cars are trying to get into this funnel, and we're all jockeying for position, and it's very, very tricky. Then enter the south curve, which is almost a 360-degree corner, and it's very difficult to hold the car in at this point under power, because I think practically all cars would understeer around this circuit. And we find that we then have to squirt out of here onto the uphill section, which comes behind the back of the pits. We very often get our pit signals from this section, illegally so. They put the big high wire fence up there to stop the mechanics giving us signals, but we can very often get a very good quick lap time in from this section. Now we come to a left-hand bend which starts the Nurburgring proper. Up over a bridge to a very nasty little left-hander, which is a second gear corner. Taken very carefully, and again very slippery in the wet. A very fast downhill section where we're reaching speeds in the order of about 130 miles an hour. This is followed by a series of left and right turns, about 5 or 6 in all, very close together, and very, very tricky to take at any speed at all. And it's most important to get the exit right from every corner. So I think a smooth flow through these series of corners would give one a better lap time. As you can see, the cars are eroding away the edges of the circuit here. We're trying to pinch every available inch of road here to straighten out the corners. There's a good example there. He just touches the dirt and a little puff of dust rises. And we're trying to do this all the time. Of course, it pays to be extremely accurate on this circuit and have the following corner in mind. Now, this is the last corner of these series of left and right-hand corners, and it's a right-hander followed by a left-hander, which is slightly downhill and slightly banked, and then we burst out of the woods to quite a good view if we had time to look at it. And we go rushing down over a couple of bridges until we come to a section called the Flugplatz, just here in front of us. Actually, all the cars leave the ground at this point. It's an extremely tricky corner because it's followed up by a very fast right-hander. And it's, you have to make sure that you haven't gone too fast and get out of control when you're in the air. so that you don't get time to get stopped for the next corner. We're now entering a very fast downhill section. This point here is about the fastest path on the circuit. It's downhill, and we get up to about 150 miles an hour. It's even quicker than down the straight. And it gets very tricky stopping because we have to brake on a rather fast left-hand corner. The surface here is very bad, as you can see from the camera shake. This is the Foxroo, fast downhill section, left and right-hand corners, all concealed from view. It was on this section in the practice for the 1962 Grand Prix that I met with a slight accident when I ran over a television camera that had dropped off another car. I hit the camera just about here, it held my oil tank, and I spun off into the ditch on the left-hand side on my own oil. I went burrowing down this ditch behind those hedges like a giant mole and ended up about here, still fortunately up the right way. We now come to another section in the woods. The corner's gradually getting slower and slower until we reach this part here, which is about one of the first corners on the circuit with a sort of skyline view. And then we drop into second gear here, and it's very easy to overdo it as it's so slow. Now we come to the downhill section going down to Adenauer Gate. It's a very fast section, but you need to be extremely brave to go down here very quickly. The corners follow one another in quick succession, going around the side of the hill, and if you can, you try and set the car up into a giant drift to drive the car through all these corners in one smooth line. This is a little bridge that must not be confused with the Adenauer Gate one. The approach is very similar, and I'm afraid one or two people do make mistakes. And you can probably see one or two little holes in the hedges, which shows where they actually left the circuit. This, you have to hug right into the hedge. It pays to touch the actual leaves of the hedge with the left-hand wheel. And now we're approaching the Adenauer Gate, which is a fairly similar approach to the little bridge we've just seen. Very fast. I always ease off just about here, drop into here, touch the dirt on the outside, and brake very hard for this bridge here. And then set the car up into the left-hand corner and hug the inside of the track very closely here. And over the bridge and away up to the uphill climb till we reach, again, the full height of the Nurburgring circuit. Now straight into the carousel. One gets very heavy due to the extra G-load on one's own body weight, and the car gets turned around. It's very easy for the car to slip out of this banked section, and then, of course, you go straight through the hedge like a stone on the end of a piece of string. This is the Swallowtail, which is a smaller version of the carousel. Being less banked, it's even easier to fly out. Now, this is the straight between two very tall hedges. It's fairly narrow. One would imagine that one will get to speeds of about 170 miles an hour on this very long straight. In actual fact, it's climbing all the time uphill, and that it also dips. It's in fact called the switchback. The cars go up and down through little sort of rises and hollows, and it is on occasion from the cars that one is following that actually disappear from view. So one wants to be very alert at this section and looking in one's mirror. One could easily be lulled into a false sense of security and believing that there was no one following you or no one close enough. In actual fact, you might just be in a hollow. We approach a very, very tricky corner at the end of this straight, which goes up under a bridge, and the cars actually leave the ground, and just as they leave the ground here, we've got to turn left. The car is very, very light, and the road drops away, making the position even worse. This is followed by a series of very fast left and right-hand corners which could almost be taken flat out in 1962 Formula One cars. Very tricky. The car is slipping and sliding, and fairly steep too. One wants to be properly geared. And this completes another lap of the German Grand Prix circuit, the Nurburgring.